What is up, guys? It is Marcus from Perspective Sports, and today we'll be talking about the 2018-2019 Miami Dolphins and why they are the worst NFL team ever assembled. And I know there's been winless teams in the past. You look at the 0-11-1 Cowboys, the 0-14 Tampa Bay Bucks, the 0-8-1 Baltimore Colts, and then more recently the 2017 Cleveland Browns and the 2008 Detroit Lions, both of which went 0-16. But let me tell you why this is different, and let's start with the 2017 Cleveland Browns. This team was relatively competitive in their games. 6 of their losses were by 1 possession, 5 of which were by 4 or fewer points. And then they went to overtime twice during that season. They lost to the 13-3 Pittsburgh Steelers by 3 points in Week 1 and 4 points in Week 17. They lost to the 9-7 Tennessee Titans, who got to the divisional round of the playoffs by 3 points in overtime. They lost to the 10-6 Jacksonville Jaguars, who got to the AFC title game 19-7, and that game was 10-7 all the way until the fourth quarter. This Browns team was no pushover. It even had a Pro Bowler in Joe Schobert, who had 142 tackles, 3 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 4 passes defended, and an interception. This Browns team was relatively competitive. And now let's take a look at the Detroit Lions, who were obviously taking to get Matthew Stafford, the stud quarterback out of Georgia. And this season saw Dan Orlovsky, Dante Culpepper, and a 36-year-old John Kitna all get starts. Drew Stanton and Drew Hansen also got playing time. So that's 5 quarterbacks, none of which had more touchdowns than interceptions. But despite all of that, 5 of their losses were by 1 possession, and 3 were by 10 or less points. The Detroit Lions even had their kicker Jason Hanson go 21 of 22 and 8 for 8 from 50 and beyond, and was considered a Pro Bowl snub by Bleacher Report. Running back Kevin Smith rushed for 978 yards for 8 touchdowns, caught 39 passes for 286 yards as a rookie. But one thing these teams had in common was the fact that they were semi-competitive and had a plan. The Detroit Lions' plan was to get their quarterback of the futures, and it's worked. The Browns' plan was to get good football players, and those were the words of GM John Dorsey, who was brought in about halfway through the season. He said they didn't get any good football players, so that's what he went out and did. They brought in Jarvis Landry, got Baker Mayfield. He kept the players that he thought were good and got rid of the ones he thought didn't. But the Dolphins don't seem to have a plan in any way, shape, or form, and allow me to explain. On March 15th, 2019, the team trades away Ryan Tannehill, who had been the team's starting quarterback and pretty good for about 7 years, would have been 8, but he missed a year with an injury. They traded him to the Tennessee Titans along with the 2019 7th-round pick in exchange for a 2020 4th-round pick and a 2019 6th-round pick, leaving the team with a void at quarterback. Then they decided to make a pretty smart choice in trading for a young, soon-to-be second-year quarterback, Josh Rosen, after he was about to be shunned by the Arizona Cardinals. For a 2019 2nd-round pick, they would also get a 2019 5th-rounder along with Rosen, giving the team a young quarterback to build around and start a new era, but they didn't do that at all. The Dolphins then go out and sign veteran quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick to a 2-year, $11 million deal with $7 million guaranteed to compete for the starting role with Josh Rosen, which doesn't make any sense. You trade for a young quarterback to groom and grow, only to bring in a guy that you have no long-term plans or interest in to compete with him. And then you give the starting job to him, and now the season is being labeled tank for Tua. So what was the point in bringing in Josh Rosen if you're not going to give him A, a fair shot to play, B, a chance to grow, or C, give him a competent line or a team for that matter? And that leads me to my second point. They gutted the roster. The Miami Dolphins announced to the world that they were tanking when they sent away up-and-coming left tackle Laramie Tunsil, who you really got for a steal on draft day because of all of the gas mask debacle, to the Texans along with their best receiver in Kenny Stills, along with a 2020 4th-round pick and a 2021 6th-round pick in exchange for 2 first-round picks, 2020 and 2021, and a 2021 2nd-round pick. That's an excellent haul if we're being honest, but you don't do that when you're supposed to be building around your franchise quarterback that you just traded a 2nd-round pick for. And now, whatever quarterback you want this year, you'll have to trade Josh Rosen, whose value will have imploded by then. And your quarterback of the future will have nothing around him to make them successful. They will get beaten up by the offensive line. They won't have any receivers to catch the ball. The defense will allow as many points as the offense feels like scoring that day. And the quarterback will be hung out to dry. And as I was recording this video, the Dolphins have officially traded future star and Minka Fitzpatrick to the Pittsburgh Steelers in exchange for a 2020 1st-round pick, giving them 5 first-round picks over the next 2 seasons. And on top of that, the coaching has been terrible. Brian Flores worked in New England alongside Bill Belichick, and that Dolphins defense looks awful. It looks unprepared. The Patriots were just trying things in the first half, and they made Lamar Jackson look like Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. He was just flinging the ball all over the place, and he didn't even need to run because he had all day in the pocket. The Dolphins couldn't get any pressure, and their secondary was hung out to dry. And yes, that could be chalked up to personnel, but Detroit and Cleveland didn't have the best personnel either, and they were still competitive. The Dolphins have been outscored 102-10 in 2 weeks of football. Well, there you guys have it. The Dolphins are tanking, and it's pretty obvious, and they're doing a phenomenal job of it, but I think it'll all be in vain because they don't seem to have a plan. I understand trading veteran players for draft picks and or younger picks because there's no long-term plan for them, but they're doing the opposite. They're trading away all their young talent and citing veterans who aren't a part of the long-term plan. And look at how they've handled Josh Rosen, only playing him in late stages of blowouts just to get hit and not get any real reps. What can you learn from that? How could you tell if he's a franchise quarterback when he's only playing in the last 3 minutes of a game and he's getting beat up the entire time? And then circling back to how they got rid of all the young talent for draft picks who aren't likely to be as good as the players they traded. Laramie Tunsil allowed 1 sack last season. 1. He's allowed 2 this season so far, but that could be chalked up to getting used to a new system so fast. And he has no holding calls this season, and he was called for just 2 last season. 2 in 15 games. You don't trade that guy, especially when you're supposed to be looking for a young quarterback, or you have your guy of the future. You don't trade a quality left tackle. Then you have Minka Fitzpatrick, a do-it-all DB who got frustrated because he kept being moved around. And I don't think he'd be mad if he was being moved into position to make plays. The Dolphins were doing the opposite. They were putting him in bad spots. They were having him in one-on-one coverages with like Hollywood Brown. They weren't putting him in a place to have success. And those are just 2 players that I don't think you can replace. If you find a young, versatile, elite defensive back, you keep him at all costs. Especially if you find a quality left tackle. Why do you think the Texans parted ways with 2 first-round picks with no problem? Because the most important position on the O-line is filled for years to come. Dallas spent years drafting offensive linemen and paid them probably more than they wanted to keep them around. But look at them now. Well, again, there you guys have it. That's just my opinion on the Miami Dolphins. I feel that this is going to be the worst NFL team ever assembled because A, they're not going to be competitive. B, there is no plan. And C, there just seems to be no sense of direction for this team. What do you guys think down in the comment section below? Which is the worst team, the 2017 Cleveland Browns, 2008 Detroit Lions, or this year's Miami Dolphins?